Emmerdale has confirmed John Sugden's motive for kidnapping Kev Townsend. And it's not good news for fan-favorite couple Rob Ron. John began to lay out his master plan in the show's tense Boxing Day episode, explaining how Kev's reputation for crazy behavior could prove very useful to him. The show's big Christmas twist has seen John hold Kev captive as he plots his revenge against his oblivious half-brother Robert. With everything needing to unfold perfectly, John smiled, and the smile did not reach his eyes. Not for Robert. For what he took. For what he's been given. For what was my right. I've been patient. I've been careful. The game is long. You, Kev Townsend, are my plan A. Kev's laugh was a brittle thing. Plan A? You've got me tied up in a barn and you call me Plan A? John tilted his head. You catch on fast. Jealous ex with a history of violence. Kills husband in a crime of passion, then tries to turn the gun on himself. A neat note, a few confessions, a tragic love story. The papers will eat it. The villagers will weep. Aaron will be broken. And me? I walk in like a savior. The grieving partner. The man who was always there. The man who loved Aaron when he didn't know how to love himself. Kev's stomach dropped as if he'd been pushed down a flight of invisible stairs. You're going to kill Robert. You're going to. I might. John's answer was a promise and a threat. Or I might make sure you do. Either way, Robert dies, Kev. Robert dies, and the world will spin the way it should. Outside the barn, the village hugged its normality like a blanket. Christmas bells still hung in a few windows, half-heartedly jangling in a December breeze. Charity Dingle, who had spent the morning nursing a head full of questions and a heart full of stubborn pride, walked through the village with a hand-stitched envelope in her pocket that felt like a grenade. Charity's morning had begun like any other, a dance of obligations and soft resentments. She had spent the holiday with Mackenzie Boyd and their newborn, thinking the worst of her past had been settled. She had lied, she knew that. She had told Mackenzie a tidy story about the baby's paternity to spare them both the disruption of other people's gossip. Then this slip of paper, unopened until now, had fallen into her hands like a confession from someone else's life. It was not her handwriting. The looping letters were too neat, the ink the wrong black for anything farmish. The note was short, acid, and clinical. The truth about the baby's father, who did and did not know, whose secrecy was a lie that smelled worse than the mince pies cooling on a sill. Charity's first thought was of Vanessa Woodfield. Not that she thought Vanessa had written it, but it was Vanessa who had the motive, the jealousy, the motive to unsettle Charity. Charity's second thought was of Mackenzie, who deserved the truth, but the hand that had scrawled the note wanted chaos. When Charity dialed Vanessa, her voice was a whip. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, Vanessa. You don't get to do this to me, do you understand? You and me are going to be having some serious words. Vanessa, at a cafe with a friend who had noticed the tremor in her voice, was incredulous. Charity, I didn't. What are you talking about? I wouldn't write that. Why would I? That doesn't even make sense. Charity's reply was a cliff edge. Someone's playing puppet master. Vanessa's hands tightened around her cup. She thought of John Sugden and that cold look in his eyes whenever he'd walked past Robert and Aaron in the pub. She thought of Mackenzie's trust and how fragile it had been stretched thin by secrets and the baby's tiny, sleeping mouth. Vanessa feared scandal like some fear fire. She'd seen what it did to people. But she was quick to anger, quick to defend. Before Charity could press the point, she had pressed more. She had said Vanessa's name aloud in a way that cut deeper than any blade. Vanessa's cheeks flared. Don't you dare. I'd never do that to you. The accusation landed like a thrown stone in Mackenzie's lap. When Charity marched round to the cafe, fury trimmed in resolution, Mackenzie was already on edge. The note had been found, and now Charity believed she knew who the arsonist was. Mackenzie's face hardened with defensive love. Vanessa's face softened with hurt. You think I wrote it? Vanessa asked, the question small and incredulous. You've been jealous since day one, Charity said. You want what I've got back. You want to ruin me so you can climb back into his bed. Is that it? This is ridiculous, Vanessa said. If you have evidence, show it. Don't spray accusations around like cheap perfume. Charity tossed the envelope onto the table between them like a gauntlet. It landed face down, as if the truth itself were unwilling to reveal itself. Back in the barn, John was pacing now, a wire inside his head sparking with each step. He had rehearsed scenes of grief, Robert's funeral, Aaron's fainting at the graveside, his own embrace of a broken man. He had prepared letters, anonymous, precise, cruel, that would land weeks from now when the world would be properly primed for tragedy. You can stop this. Kev's voice was softer now, the menace of John's plan having pushed him past anger into something that felt like pleading. "You don't have to use me. You can just walk away." John laughed, the sound like a hinge. "Walk away? I don't know how to. Not when everything that should have been mine sits across the village, smiling. I want it to hurt them. I want them to know. You were useful. But you can destroy this." Kev thought of Robert. Of nights in the Woolpack when Robert's charm made everyone believe in redemption. Robert had been cruel to John. Robert had been careless. But murder? The thought slid across Kev like ice. He was no hero. He had a past that would frighten a saint. But he was not a murderer. "You're insane," he said. John's face softened into something like pity. "People say that when they're falling out a window, Kev, they don't see the ground until it's too late." As the afternoon turned to bitter light, a different theater was playing in the pub. Robert Sugden, unaware of the trap being plotted, sat with Aaron. They were the village's golden couple. Opposite halves that fit together like weather and shelter. Aaron laughed, releasing a sound Robert loved to collect. Robert talked about the farm, about mending fences, about the tedious bureaucracy of owning things. He didn't notice the way the wallpaper seemed to close in, or the way certain eyes lingered longer on him now, eyes like John's. Outside, a car slowed past the pub and then reversed. John watched from a hooded seat across the lane, his hands like props, steady as he adjusted the radio, pretending to hum along with a song he did not know. The plan was a machine now, small cogs clicking into place, and Kev at the center was its oil. "Why me?" Kev whispered that night, as John put a blanket over his knees and showed him photos. Photos of Robert laughing with someone who was not John, photos that were annotated with bitter captions. "Because people will believe you," John said. "Because you've been written as volatile. Because the village loves a tragic hero. Because Aaron will look at you and see the narrative he wants to see. And because I will be there to fill the silence." Kev's mind drifted back to his own half-formed life, broken parole, glances that cut like knives, a bruised reputation stitched into the fabric of his name. It was true. A history of bad choices made a convincing script. But Kev's hands shook as he considered it. "I won't kill him." John's jaw tightened. "You won't have to. You'll be found with the gun in your hand. You'll have written a note. It will be clean. It will be concise. You'll be my saint and my scapegoat in one tidy package." Outside the barn window, snow began to fall, not heavily, but the first flake like a punctuation mark. It was holiday scenery and John loved scenery. It made tragedies look like destiny. He tucked another letter into his coat, a letter he intended to plant on Charity's doorstep. He imagined Charity's gasp, Vanessa's glares, Mackenzie's broken face. He imagined Aaron's gratitude as he stepped into the role of rescuer. Meanwhile, Charity's accusation had detonated, sending ripples of suspicion through the village. Vanessa, hurt and indignant, sought out Mackenzie to clear her name. Mackenzie, who had been trying to stave off doubt, felt his foundations wobble. He loved Charity in an ordinary way, which was the most extraordinary thing in a place that thrived on melodrama. To imagine there was betrayal, another player, another secret, was to imagine losing everything. "Charity, why would I write that?" Vanessa asked, grabbing her friend's hands across the pub table. "I'm not like that. I may be blunt, but I'm not vengeful." Charity's jaw was set. Pride is a stubborn vine. You can cut it back, but it always finds a way. "Someone wants me to look guilty. Someone wants to set Mackenzie off the scent. I'm not letting them succeed." Vanessa stared at her, and for the first time in years, the woman who prided herself on knowing everyone's secrets felt like a novice in a class she'd dropped out of. She remembered John's calculated glances, and a flicker of unease tugged at her ankles. "Keep your phone on," she told Charity. "If someone's trying to frame you, we catch them." As night fell, the barn's shadows drew long and patient. Kev lay awake, turning over the morality of survival. Outside, the road was empty, muffled by a blanket of snow. Somewhere in the village, Robert and Aaron laughed, a sound Kev could no longer be invited to. The plan, however, has a life of its own. It is a living thing that requires mistakes, and humans are excellent at providing them. Kennedy, no, Kev, was not a chess piece. He was a person who bled and thought and feared. When John turned his back to fetch a pair of gloves, Kev saw his chance. Not to strike the blow John demanded, but to bend the blade. He worked his wrists against the rope, the frayed fibers like the strings of fate. He thought of Aaron's face in the pub, of Robert's tendency to laugh when things should have been serious, of the small mercies in life. He could imagine being blamed forever, a ghost story parents told children. "Be careful, or you'll end up like Kev Townsend." But he could also imagine something else: confession, sacrifice, truth. He was not sure which of those was sane. He wriggled nearer to the door. John's back was turned, unfeeling, humming a tune as he placed letters in different envelopes. The gun lay on a shelf, cold and clinical, a thing that will take off the world's sharp edges. Kev made himself small and steady. If he could get free, he could get out. If he could get out, he could tell the truth. If he could tell the truth, maybe, just maybe, he could save them all. The rope gave with a final, hateful snap. Kev fell to the floor and kept quiet, listening. John whistled, oblivious, then turned. Their eyes met. For a moment the world held its breath. John's face was a battle of emotions: fury, calculation, and a corner of admiration for a man who had surprised him. "Thought you'd make it easy for me," John said. Kev stood, hands clawing for purchase. "I'm not your plan A." John's mouth tightened. "You always were. Now you can choose to be the tragic hero, or you can choose to be the man who ruins me. Which will it be, Kev?" Kev's answer was a laugh that was not funny. "You'll never get away with this." John stepped forward, the barn's light catching the glint of possibility in his eyes. But then the sound came, distant, muffled at first, then clearer, voices and the clatter of feet on gravel. Someone had been suspicious. Vanessa? Charity? Mackenzie? The village was a chorus when it needed to be. John's head snapped toward the door, and in that turn he made the smallest of mistakes. He left the gun out. Kev lunged. They grappled, two hulking shapes in a space that smelled of hay and regret. The gun slid along the floor, a black beetle searching for cracks. Outside the barn, Charity, Vanessa, and Mackenzie had converged, drawn by the paper trail and a gut that doesn't understand logic. Charity's panic had a moral edge. She had come looking for answers and found a locked barn. The lock gave under a combined effort, and the door fell open like a scene missing its final act. Inside, there was no murder, only the messy, tactile truth. John stood with a hand on Kev's shoulder, breath ragged, eyes wild. The gun lay between them, the letters scattered like confetti, plans exposed. Charity's eyes flickered over the note she had found earlier, recognizing the handwriting now in a way that made her blood run cold. "You," she spat, aimless fury finding a target. You lying, poisonous." John smiled, and it was the smile of a man whose theater had been interrupted. "Charity," he said mildly, as if they were at a garden party, and this was an awkward conversation. "You found my note." Vanessa moved like a woman possessed. "Why? Why do this?" John's shoulders shrugged. "Because some things need to be corrected. Because someone had everything handed to them and I had nothing. Because people like Mackenzie need to be shaken awake." Mackenzie, who had been close enough to see the edges of the plan, understood now. John had written the note to sow distrust between Charity and Vanessa, to create an atmosphere of blame, to distract, so that his true work could go unseen. He had been clever and cruel, a puppeteer who had not counted on the puppet cutting its own strings. The police would later sort through the mess, take statements, and John would have to answer for every small, devastating thing he had done. For now there was a silence heavy as snowfall, and within it a strange, fragile relief. Robert lived. Aaron was safe. A plan had unraveled. Kev sat on a crate and stared at his hands. He had resisted the role John had planned for him. He had not proved himself heroic, merely human. "I didn't want to be your plan A," he said to Charity, to Vanessa, to Mackenzie, to anyone who would listen. "I wanted to live." Charity looked at him with something like pity and contempt braided together. "You're a fool for getting involved in any of this," she said softly. "But you're not a killer. Not today." Vanessa, who had been accused and nearly broken by Charity's suspicion, found a sliver of grace. "I'm sorry I doubted you," Charity said, and the admission landed like an offering. Vanessa's face crumpled a little. "It's not you I'm sorry for. It's what he could have done." John's eyes flicked around the room with the restlessness of a caged animal. "You think this is over?" he said.